The veiled dominion stretched across half the galaxy. Worlds burned or bent to its will, and hundreds of species bowed before its throne. Yet in the eyes of Princess Ayla, heir to that vast empire, the court was never safe. Power had teeth, and every smile in the palace hall could hide a blade. When the High Council announced her marriage, she did not protest. She knew duty came before desire. Still, when they revealed the chosen husband, a human from Earth, Ayla could not stop her breath from catching in disbelief. A human. Of all species, the Veil regarded humanity as backward, provincial, and strange. Earth had no empire, no fleets that could compare with the Dominion. But it had one thing the Dominion wanted: independence. In a galaxy where nearly every people had been forced into Veil service, humans alone stood apart, neither conquered nor fully allied. So the marriage was made. A bond of peace sealed not by treaties but by flesh and blood. The day Daniel Oat arrived, the palace echoed with whispers. He came not in armor, not in the robes of nobles, but in simple dark clothes, a plain tunic, sturdy boots and hands roughened from years of work. He carried himself with no pomp, no swagger. To the nobles he looked like a farmer dragged in from some muddy field. Princess Ayla sat upon her throne of crystal and light, her expression calm but her mind racing. This was to be her husband? This quiet man with gray eyes and a farmer's calloused fingers? He bowed, not too deep, not too shallow, and when he raised his head, his eyes met hers without flinching. For a heartbeat she felt something unsettling, a steadiness in his gaze, like a calm sea hiding unfathomable depths. But then he smiled, small and plain, and the moment passed. The court laughed behind jeweled fans and whispered in the language of politics. The human is harmless, they said. A lamb among wolves. The princess will rule him easily. Ayla almost believed them. Almost. The wedding was swift. Veiled traditions mixed uneasily with Earth's simple customs. The nobles mocked the plain rings Daniel brought, shaped by his own hand, forged not of rare crystal but of steel from his farm's old plow. Ayla accepted hers with a steady face, though in her heart she felt insult stir. That night, in chambers carved from silver stone, she confronted him. "You know nothing of our ways," she said, her voice sharp. "Why did you not bring gifts of worth? Jewels, relics, ships?" Daniel sat at the low table, his posture unshaken. "Because gifts of worth are not always made of gold. I brought what my hands shaped. If that is not enough, then I have nothing else to offer." His words were simple, yet they carried no shame. He did not apologize. He did not lower his eyes. Ayla studied him, waiting for him to tremble before her authority. He did not. He poured himself a cup of water and drank as if they were equals, not princess and farmer. Something inside her bristled. Something else wondered. Days turned into weeks. Daniel wandered the palace gardens with unhurried steps, speaking with servants as if they were friends, not tools. He asked questions that no noble bothered with. What flowers grew fastest in the alien soil? What food kept the workers strong? What stories the guards told each other at night? The court mocked him as simple-minded. "The human wastes his days with gardeners and cooks," they sneered. He does not understand the language of power. But Ayla noticed something different. Wherever Daniel went, people smiled. Servants who once avoided her gaze now laughed softly when the human passed. Guards stood taller when he greeted them by name. Even the gardener spoke of him with respect, saying he understood soil and seed better than half the Dominion scholars. And yet, Ayla still saw no greatness. He was kind, yes, but kindness could not protect a throne. One evening, Ayla walked with Daniel along the grand balcony that overlooked the sprawl of the capital. Thousands of lights shimmered below, and in the distance the shipyards burned with the glow of engines. "You are quiet tonight," Daniel said, his tone easy. "I wonder," Ayla replied, her voice cool, "why Earth agreed to this marriage at all. What did they see in sending me, you?" Daniel's smile was faint. "They saw peace, and maybe they saw a farmer who once knew war." Ayla turned her head sharply. "War?" He nodded, eyes distant. "Before farming, I wore another life. I learned to fight, to plan, to survive. But when peace came, I chose soil over steel." The words stirred unease within her. He had spoken them without pride, without boasting, only as fact. She searched his face, but it remained calm, unreadable. "Do you expect me to believe a farmer was once a soldier?" she asked. Daniel looked out across the city lights. "Believe what you wish. Truth does not bend for belief." Her heart shifted, though she would not admit it. Perhaps this man was not as simple as the court thought. A week later, the attempt came. It was during a banquet, the hall glittering with crystal light. Nobles laughed, music swelled, and dancers spun in shimmering garments. Ayla sat at the head of the table, Daniel at her side. Quiet as always. The assassin struck from the rafters. Silent, swift, a shadow with poisoned blade. Ayla had only a heartbeat to react, her guards too far away. But before steel could touch her, Daniel moved. Not with the clumsy panic of a farmer, but with the trained precision of a soldier. He seized a wine jug and hurled it, striking the assassin mid-leap. As the blade clattered across the floor, Daniel surged forward, tackling the attacker with force that belied his lean frame. By the time the guards rushed in, the would-be killer lay bound, and Daniel stood calm, breathing steady as if he had faced such danger before. The hall erupted. Nobles gasped, whispers flying faster than sparks. The human fought like a soldier. He should not have known how to strike so true. Perhaps he is not simple after all. Ayla stared at her husband, her heart pounding. The image of him as a harmless farmer shattered like glass. Later, when they were alone, she demanded answers. "You knew the attack was coming." "I knew someone would try sooner or later," Daniel said simply. "The eyes in this palace are too sharp, the smiles too thin. You fought like a warrior." He met her gaze. "Once I was. I laid it down. But not forever." Ayla's voice faltered. "Why hide it?" Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because sometimes the strongest seed is the one that grows unseen." And with that, he turned away, leaving her with a storm in her heart. That night, Princess Ayla lay awake in her chamber, staring at the ceiling carved with constellations. The human she had believed simple, harmless, a lamb among wolves, had just saved her life with the skill of a predator. He had eyes that saw more than he revealed, hands that could both plant seeds and strike with precision. For the first time, she wondered if the High Council had made a mistake, not in underestimating Earth, but in underestimating Daniel Oat. The Palace of the Veiled Dominion was not only made of stone and crystal, it was built from lies, secrets, and schemes. Every hall echoed with footsteps, but also with whispers. Every noble's smile carried a hidden meaning. For Princess Ayla, this was the air she had breathed since childhood. But for Daniel Oat, her human husband, the palace was still new. He walked its corridors with calm steps, as if the shadows did not frighten him. To the nobles, this was foolishness. To Ayla, it was something else. She did not yet know what. The assassination attempt had shaken the palace. Though the guards swore loyalty, the council swore protection, and the nobles swore innocence, Ayla knew better. Someone had sent that killer, someone inside the palace. The whispers spread quickly. The princess lives only because of her human husband. He fought like one trained. Strange, for a farmer. Some nobles began to respect Daniel, but others saw danger. A husband who was more than he seemed could upset the balance of power. And in the Veil Court, power was everything. Ayla kept her face calm, but inside her thoughts raced. She had agreed to this marriage thinking Daniel was simple, someone she could control. But now she saw a man who had secrets, and secrets were dangerous. One morning she found him in the gardens, crouched among the soil with the gardeners. His hands were dirty, blackened with earth, and he was laughing softly at a joke one of the workers told. "You spend too much time here," Ayla said, her voice cool as she approached. Daniel looked up, brushing soil from his palms. "Plants are honest. They grow when you care for them, they wither when you don't. No politics, no games." "This is not Earth," she replied sharply. "Here, politics is survival. If you cannot play the game will consume you." Daniel stood slowly, meeting her eyes with that steady, unreadable gaze. "Maybe, but sometimes the best way to survive a game is not to play by its rules." Her heart skipped, though she hid it well. He spoke as if he had lived this truth before. That evening, during a council gathering, the cracks in the palace walls grew wider. The High Council sat in their tall seats, faces hidden behind jeweled masks. Nobles filled the chamber, their robes glittering, their words sharp as blades. They spoke of alliances, taxes, and border wars. But the true subject, hidden beneath, was Daniel. One noble, Lord Krivath, rose with a sneer. His long cloak trailed behind him like a shadow. "Princess," he said, voice dripping with false respect, "your husband seems useful with his fists. But is that truly fitting for a royal consort? A man of soil and sweat?" Laughter rippled through the chamber. Daniel did not move. He stood at Ayla's side, silent, calm. Ayla's jaw tightened. She wanted to defend him, but politics was a knife fight, and defending openly could make her look weak. Instead, Daniel spoke. His voice was even, steady, cutting through the noise. "Better a man of soil," he said, "than a man of rot." The chamber fell silent. Lord Krivath's eyes burned with fury, but Daniel did not flinch. He simply looked at the noble as if staring into the face of weather, a storm that might rage but would always pass. Ayla felt something stir inside her. It was not just relief. It was pride. That night in their private chambers, she confronted him again. "You should not have spoken so," she said, though her voice was softer than she intended. "You make enemies with every word." Daniel poured himself water and sat calmly. "Enemies are not made by words. They are revealed by them." She frowned, studying him. "You act as if you know this place better than you should." His eyes flickered, shadows passing across them. "I know people. Palaces, councils, thrones, they are built of people. And people are not so different, whether on earth or here." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Ayla could not decide if he was foolish or wise. Days later, another danger came. This time, it was not a blade in the night, but poison in the cup. During a feast, a servant placed a golden goblet before Ayla, filled with shining red wine. She lifted it, but before she could drink, Daniel's hand shot out, firm yet gentle, stopping her. "What are you doing?" she hissed softly. He sniffed the wine, then dipped his finger and touched it lightly to his tongue. At once his face hardened. "Poison," he said simply. Gasps spread across the table. Nobles exchanged glances, eyes wide. The servant trembled, protesting innocence, but the guard seized him. Ayla's heart raced. Again. Again this man had seen what others missed. Again he had saved her. When the feast ended, she cornered him in the quiet of the corridors. "How?" she demanded. "How did you know?" Daniel looked at her, his gray eyes steady. "On Earth during the wars, poison was common. A soldier who lived long learned to smell it, taste it, see it. My senses are trained. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" she repeated, disbelief in her tone. He gave a small shrug. "Sometimes the simplest skills save the most lives." Ayla stared at him for a long moment. For the first time, she felt vulnerable. She, the princess of the Dominion, protected not by armies or fleets, but by this man. And she wondered, what else had he learned in that hidden past of his? The palace grew restless. Some nobles whispered that Daniel was dangerous, too dangerous to remain close to the throne. Others whispered that perhaps the humans were not as weak as the Dominion believed. Plots deepened. Shadows thickened. One night, Ayla awoke to find Daniel standing at the balcony looking out at the endless city lights. "Why do you watch?" she asked quietly. He did not turn. "Because the cracks are growing. This palace is like glass, beautiful, shining, but fragile. One strike in the right place and it will shatter." She felt a chill. "And what of us?" Finally he turned, his gaze steady, his voice calm. "That depends. Do we let it shatter, or do we hold it together?" For the first time, Princess Ayla felt truly unsure. She, raised in power, trained in politics, suddenly realized she no longer held all the answers. But Daniel Oat, the human farmer, the simple man she had dismissed, he carried answers she could not yet see. The palace walls had cracks, and through them the truth was beginning to shine. The palace no longer looked the same to Princess Ayla. She had lived in its shining halls since childhood, yet now every corner seemed darker, every whisper sharper. The cracks were spreading. 2 attempts on her life had already failed, thanks to her husband. But how many more would come? And who was he, this Daniel Oat, the man who saved her again and again? She had once thought him a simple farmer. But farmers did not move like soldiers. Farmers did not sense poison before it touched the lips of a princess. Farmers did not speak of power and people as if they had studied empires their whole life. No, Daniel Oat had a past he had not shared. and Ayla, princess of the Veiled Dominion, decided she would discover it. Secrets in the garden. The next morning, she found him once more among the palace gardens. Daniel's hands were dirty with soil as he knelt beside a row of flowering plants. The gardeners around him smiled, relaxed, as though he were one of them. Ayla stood above, her jeweled robe glittering under the pale suns. "You hide yourself in dirt again," she said coldly. Daniel looked up, brushing soil from his fingers. "I don't hide. I grow things." "There's a difference," her eyes narrowed. "You also grow secrets." The gardeners froze, uncertain. Daniel's gaze flickered, but he did not rise. "Secrets?" "Yes," Ayla said, stepping closer. "A farmer does not fight like a trained warrior. A farmer does not read poison like a book. A farmer does not speak of politics as if he lived them." "Who are you, Daniel Oat? What are you hiding?" The silence in the garden was heavy. The gardeners looked away, pretending not to hear. At last, Daniel stood. He was taller than she remembered, stronger too, though he carried no armor. His eyes, gray steady, met hers without fear. "I hide nothing," he said, "but there are things I do not speak of. Because speaking of them does not change them." Ayla's heart thudded. He was not denying, he was protecting. The first story that night, Ayla summoned him to her private chamber. The silver lamps glowed softly, throwing shadows across the walls carved with constellations. She sat in silence, waiting. When Daniel entered, she spoke without hesitation. "You will tell me the truth. Tonight." Daniel stood by the door, his face unreadable. "And if I refuse? Then you remain a stranger in my house, and a stranger cannot be trusted, not even if he is my husband." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he sighed and moved to the low table, pouring himself water. "You want the truth," he said at last. "Very well." And he began. "I was born on Earth in a place of wide fields and open skies. My family were farmers, yes. But the world I grew in was not peaceful. Nations clashed. Borders shifted. Armies marched. I was young, but war does not ask permission to enter your life. It comes whether you call it or not." Ayla listened, leaning forward, her eyes sharp. "I joined the Earth Guard," Daniel continued. "Not because I loved war, but because war left no choice. I learned to fight, to plan, to see what others could not. I became a strategist. My duty was not only to hold a weapon, but to guide others, to read enemies, to break them with patience instead of strength. That is what I was." Ayla's lips parted. So her suspicion had been right. He had been a soldier. "Why leave it?" she asked quietly. His gaze softened, shadows passing over his face. "Because war eats men alive. Even when they win, they lose pieces of themselves. I watched friends fall. I watched homes burn. I survived, yes. But when peace came, I had nothing left to give it except the wish to plant, to grow, to heal, so I left. I became what my father was, a farmer. It was the only way I knew to silence the noise." For the first time since meeting him, Ayla felt something unexpected. Sorrow. His voice carried no pride, no boasting. "Only wait, and now?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her, and his eyes were steady once more. "Now I am here. Husband to a princess, a farmer in a palace, a man who wants peace but who remembers too well how to fight." The princess's thoughts. Ayla sat in silence after he finished. The truth settled inside her like a stone in water, rippling through every thought. He was not lying. She could see it in the heaviness of his eyes, in the way his voice dropped when he spoke of the dead. Daniel Oat was no simple man. He was a man who had lived two lives, one of war, one of peace, and now he stood between them both. "You should have told me," she said at last. "Would you have believed me?" he asked calmly. She opened her mouth to reply, then stopped. No, she would not have. Not when she first met him. Not when she thought him a harmless farmer. She lowered her eyes. "Perhaps not." Daniel rose, bowing his head slightly. "You asked for truth. Now you have it. What you do with it is yours to decide." Then he turned, leaving her alone in the chamber. The shadow of doubt. The next days felt different. Ayla walked through the palace halls, but her mind was no longer fixed on court games. Instead, it circled around Daniel's words. A strategist, a soldier, a man who chose peace yet could return to war at any moment. Was that dangerous? Or was it what she needed most? Her people whispered that the human was strange. The nobles muttered that he was dangerous. The council watched him with cold eyes, but Ayla, She was torn. For the first time, she did not know if she feared her husband or trusted him more than anyone else. The test one evening, a servant brought her a sealed letter. No name, only a symbol. The mark of the silent blades, the Empire's deadliest assassins. Inside, a single message. The farmer is not what he seems. We know the truth. Tell us if you wish him removed. Ayla's breath caught. Removed. Killed. Her hands trembled, but she burned the letter before Daniel could see it. That night, as he slept, she sat beside him, watching his face in the pale moonlight. He looked peaceful, almost gentle, as if the shadows of war had left him. Could she give him up to death? Could she betray the man who had saved her life twice? The man who shared his hidden truth with her? No, her decision came sharp and clear. Daniel Oat was hers. Husband, ally, mystery, whatever he was hers. And if the silent blades came for him, they would face not only a human farmer but the heir of the veiled dominion herself. The unseen bond from then on, something shifted between them. Ayla still carried doubts, but she also carried trust. Not blind trust, but the kind born from survival. The bond between two who had faced death together and lived. Daniel spoke little of his past again, but his actions spoke enough. He watched, listened, learned, and when he looked at her, his gaze was not of fear or weakness. It was the gaze of someone who saw her not as a princess, not as a throne, but as a person. For Ayla, who had grown in a palace of masks and lies, that alone was more valuable than fleets of ships. The palace had grown quiet, almost too quiet. After the events of the assassination attempts, the court seemed tense, watching every movement with sharper eyes. Princess Ayla sensed the subtle shift in the air. Whispers no longer just floated in corridors. They weighed heavily on everyone, like an unseen pressure. And through it all, Daniel Oat moved calmly, as if the entire palace were nothing more than one of his quiet fields back on Earth. But Ayla knew better. A farmer could not survive here without awareness, intelligence, and strategy. And now the High Council had noticed him. The summons one morning, Ayla was summoned to the council chambers. The room was vast, filled with glittering light from crystal windows that reflected the suns above. The High Council members were seated in their towering chairs, faces hidden behind masks of gold and silver. Every gesture, every tilt of a head screamed authority. You are here for the same reason as always, said Elder Virel, the oldest and sharpest of the council. To serve the Empire's interest. Ayla inclined her head. I understand. Your husband, Virel continued, fixing her with a cold stare, is more than a husband. He has influence, eyes that see too far, hands that act too quickly. If the Dominion is to remain secure, he must be tested. Ayla's eyes widened. Tested? Yes, Virel said. A trial of wits, the greatest challenge in the Dominion. It has always been reserved for generals and masters of strategy. He will prove himself, or the council will decide if he is a threat. The words hit Ayla like a hammer. Daniel, a human who had been dismissed as simple, was now under direct scrutiny from the most powerful minds in the galaxy. She felt a mix of fear and pride. Fear for the man she had begun to trust, and pride that perhaps he could rise to the challenge. Daniel's preparation. When she returned to her chambers, she found Daniel quietly studying the palace maps and charts. He moved with calm determination, tracing lines with his fingers, making careful marks. You know about this? She asked. Daniel looked up, gray eyes steady. I know about patterns. Battles, movements, weaknesses. The trial will not require me to fight physically. It will test my mind. And minds, no matter the species, follow logic. I will do what I can. Ayla studied him closely. He seemed calm, almost too calm. You are not afraid? Daniel shook his head. Fear is useful only when it teaches you something. Worrying about a challenge that cannot be avoided does not teach anything. She wanted to argue, to tell him this court was not like Earth. But something in her chest told her to trust him. The trial of wits begins. The council chamber was transformed. Tables were arranged with miniature terrain, mountains of carved stone, rivers etched into crystal. Soldiers in holographic uniforms were placed across the boards. The trial of wits was designed to mimic the battlefield, testing strategy, foresight, and leadership. Daniel walked into the chamber calmly. The council and the attending nobles watched him with suspicion and curiosity. The human's simple clothes were replaced with a plain robe, but there was no change in his demeanor. The first challenge was announced: repel an invading force with minimal resources and protect your key territory. Others had armies, fleets, and devices Daniel had never seen before. But he studied the terrain, the positions of enemy units, and the weaknesses in their formation. Slowly, deliberately, he moved his pieces. And then something remarkable happened. Where the other challengers relied on sheer numbers, Daniel used misdirection. He sacrificed small units to lure enemies into traps. He predicted their movements before they even occurred, shifting forces with precision. Every move was simple to the eye, yet devastatingly effective. The council murmured. The nobles whispered. The human was not only surviving the challenge, he was dominating it. A lesson in human strategy. Daniel worked through the days of the trial with patience and focus. Each challenge grew harder, more complex, yet he remained calm. He drew tactics on sand tables, carved stones, and even water. Simple lines and shapes, but when applied, they predicted the enemy's moves with uncanny accuracy. The council members leaned forward, astonished. They had never seen such precision, such creativity, and such patience in a human or in any species. Elder Varel, who had doubted him from the beginning, finally whispered, "Perhaps the humans are not weak." Ayla watched silently from the side, her pride swelling. This man she had once thought simple was showing the galaxy the truth of humanity's strength. Resourcefulness, patience, and intelligence. The ultimate challenge on the final day. The council introduced the ultimate challenge, a simulated invasion of multiple planets simultaneously. Only someone who could anticipate enemy strategy, manage multiple forces, and remain calm under pressure could succeed. The other challengers faltered, panicking at the complexity. Daniel, however, remained focused. He moved units to protect the most critical positions, predicted attacks, and even set traps that the enemies, simulated though they were, fell into repeatedly. He did not rely on technology alone. He relied on observation, deduction, and human intuition. The council had never faced a mind that combined calm patience with sharp calculation. By the end, the simulators declared him the victor. A hush fell across the chamber. Daniel Oat, the simple farmer, had passed the trial of wits. And more than that, he had impressed every member of the High Council, every noble and every observer. Ayla stepped forward, heart pounding. She had witnessed not only his skill but his brilliance. Recognition and respect. Elder Virel finally spoke. "The council recognizes your skill, Daniel Oat. You are no longer merely a consort. You are a strategist, a protector, and a man whose mind is worthy of the Dominion." Applause erupted, though some nobles' faces twisted with envy and disbelief. Daniel bowed slightly. "I did what I could," he said simply. "No more, no less." Ayla felt a surge of admiration. This was the human she had married, the man she had underestimated. The man whose hidden past now revealed itself not through words but through action. The unseen impact the trial of wits changed the palace. Nobles who had mocked him now approached him carefully. Guards treated him with newfound respect. Even the servants who had always admired him now whispered of him in awe. But Daniel remained calm. He did not boast, did not flaunt his victory. He continued to walk through the palace quietly, helping where needed, observing, listening. Ayla, however, saw the full picture. This man, this human, had taught the Dominion a lesson they would not forget. Simplicity could hide brilliance. Patience could overcome arrogance. And humanity was not weak. A princess transformed. That night, Ayla sat beside Daniel on the palace balcony. The city stretched below, lights shimmering like stars. "You have changed the court," she said softly. Daniel shrugged. "I only did what I could." "No," she replied. "You have changed me. I thought you were simple. I thought I could guide you. But now I see I was wrong. You are not only my husband, Daniel. You are extraordinary." Daniel looked at her, eyes steady. "I am only human," Ayla smiled. "And that is enough." For the first time, she felt the full power of partnership, not just love, but respect, trust, and understanding. Together, they were stronger than the council, stronger than the palace intrigue, stronger than any enemy who might come. And Daniel, the human, had drawn the attention of the entire Dominion, not with violence, not with pride, but with calm, patient brilliance. The cracks in the palace walls were still there, but for the first time, Ayla felt that together, they could hold them. The challenge was over. The Dominion had seen what humans could do, and the galaxy had only just begun to understand. The galaxy was not patient. Even after Daniel Oat passed the trial of wits, even after the court and council acknowledged his brilliance, there were forces beyond the palace that did not wait for understanding. The enemies of the Veil Dominion had seen weakness in humanity, and they moved quickly to exploit it. On a pale dawn, alarms rang through the capital. Ships in the sky, faster than any the Dominion had seen, descended with speed and precision. The council chambers erupted into chaos, nobles shouting orders, generals pacing frantically. Ayla stood on the balcony, heart pounding, staring at the fleet of invaders. Her mind raced. Ships, weapons, soldiers, all designed to crush, overwhelm, and destroy. But she was not alone. Daniel Oat stood beside her, calm, as always. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to threaten or intimidate. He only needed to observe. The plan the palace war room filled quickly. Generals argued, maps littered with markings and counters, voices raised and tempers flaring. Daniel quietly walked in, observing the chaos. Ayla's eyes followed him. "What will you do?" she asked. Daniel pointed to the maps, his fingers tracing lines across planets and fleets. "First," he said calmly, "we do not fight them head-on. Not yet. We must see their strategy, anticipate their moves. Their speed is their strength, but it can also be their weakness." The generals laughed. "They are thousands of ships. How can you hope to match them without attacking?" Daniel looked at them evenly. "I am not attacking. I am guiding." Ayla realized what he meant. He would turn the enemy's strength against them. That was human ingenuity, using limited resources, patience, and observation to overcome brute force. The battle begins. As the enemy fleet approached, Daniel gave clear, precise orders. Ships moved to strategic positions, small units acting as bait, larger units hidden behind asteroid belts and gravitational anomalies. The invaders, expecting easy victory, rushed forward. Their sensors picked up nothing unusual. They fell into traps Daniel had anticipated. Missiles fired into empty space, drawing them into zones where hidden defenses waited. Supply lines were cut with surgical precision. Ships collided, engines exploded, fleets scattered. Ayla watched from the palace balcony as Daniel orchestrated the defense like a conductor of an orchestra. Every move was deliberate, every action calculated, every outcome predicted. The nobles and generals stared in shock. The human, the so-called simple farmer, was saving them all. The turning point hours passed. The invaders adjusted, trying new tactics, but Daniel anticipated each change. He did not rely on alien technology alone. He used intuition, psychology, and patience. He predicted hesitation, fear, and greed. Each enemy ship that moved too quickly or too confidently fell into another carefully prepared trap. Ayla saw her husband not only managing the battle, but teaching the generals and commanders as he went. His strategies were simple in appearance. Move here, wait there. Strike now, but brilliant in effect. For the first time, she truly understood the difference between humans and the rest of the galaxy. Humans could adapt, improvise, and turn apparent weakness into strength. Where other species relied on power, humans relied on thought, courage, and observation. And Daniel Oat, the man she had once believed simple, embodied it perfectly. The final assault, the enemy, desperate to crush the heart of the Dominion, targeted the palace itself. Ships swooped down, weapons aimed at the throne city. Chaos threatened to overwhelm the defenders. Daniel moved swiftly. He divided forces strategically, placing decoy ships to lure attackers away. Shields were reinforced in unexpected ways. Evacuation plans were executed flawlessly. His calmness radiated to every soldier and officer, steadying nerves and guiding action. Ayla followed him, assisting where she could. She realized she did not need to control the battle. She only needed to trust Daniel. And for the first time, she did not feel fear. The enemy fleet struck at the palace walls, but Daniel had anticipated every attack. Ships were destroyed, enemy captains captured, weapons disabled before they could detonate. By the time the sun reached its highest point in the sky, the battle was over. The invaders had retreated, broken and humiliated, leaving behind a message that humanity, and Daniel Oat, was not to be underestimated. Victory and recognition. The palace erupted in celebration. Generals and soldiers cheered. Nobles who had doubted Daniel bowed before him. Even the High Council, who had planned to test and perhaps remove him, acknowledged his genius. Ayla approached Daniel, her eyes shining with pride and respect. "You've done what no one thought possible," she said. Daniel looked at her calm and modest. "I did what any human would do. Observe, wait, adapt, survive." Ayla shook her head, smiling. "No, not any human. You, Daniel Oat." The words carried weight in the court, in the palace, and beyond. A human had saved the veiled dominion. A human had demonstrated that cleverness, patience, and courage could overcome the greatest odds. The lesson of humanity, in the days after the battle. Daniel was consulted for strategy, leadership, and diplomacy. He trained generals, advised the princess, and subtly reshaped the court's understanding of humans. No longer seen as weak or primitive, humanity became respected, perhaps even feared, for its ingenuity and resourcefulness. Ayla walked beside him often, watching him interact with the empire's leaders. She realized that the simple man she had married had shown not only skill but wisdom, humility, and heart. He was not merely a husband, he was a symbol, and the galaxy had learned a lesson. Underestimate humans and they would surprise you. Treat them with respect, and they could change the course of history. The princess and her husband, one evening, after the celebrations had died down, Ayla and Daniel sat together on the palace balcony. The twin suns set over the city, casting long shadows across the gleaming spires. "You've changed everything," she said softly. Daniel smiled faintly. "No, Ayla, I've only done what humans have always done. Survive, adapt, and protect what matters." "And yet," she whispered, "you make it look easy." "It is not easy," he replied, "but courage is not measured by ease. It is measured by what you do when everything seems impossible." Ayla leaned closer, her hand brushing his. "I thought you were simple," she said, "but I was wrong. You are extraordinary." Daniel looked at her, gray eyes calm and steady. "I am human, and that is enough." Ayla smiled, feeling the truth of it in her heart. The galaxy had underestimated humans. The Dominion had underestimated humans. Even she had underestimated her husband, but no longer. Together they stood on the balcony, looking out at the city, the empire, and the stars beyond. Humanity had made its mark not with overwhelming power, but with patience, intelligence, and courage, and Daniel Oat, the quiet man who once seemed simple, had taught the galaxy the ultimate lesson: never underestimate a human. A new era. The veiled dominion entered a new era. Alliances shifted. Enemies reconsidered their strategies. Humanity's reputation grew. And in the center of it all, Daniel and Ayla stood united, not just as husband and wife, but as partners who had faced danger, revealed truth, and changed the course of history together. The palace walls still held secrets and whispers, but they also held hope. And the cracks that had once threatened to destroy everything now showed the light of possibility. For the first time, Princess Ayla smiled without fear. Humanity had taught her the greatest lesson. Courage, intelligence, and heart could change the stars.